A really important part of most applications is to be able to find problems. We're going to do that by adding logging, and log things that could unexpectedly happen. Sometimes we also add logging for us to be able to trace something that might happen in the future. The logging is introduced by default in ASP.NET Core. To be able to use logging, we can add a type that's going to be injected into our controller. For example, in our home controller, we can introduce an iLogger. Specifically, I'd like to use the iLogger of T, which allows me to then specify which type this logger belongs to. I've now added a private field for our logger, and we can add this as a parameter to the constructor. Then we have to use the logger somewhere in the application. It won't just magically start logging without us actually using the logger. When we call logger dot, inspecting the available methods on the logger, we can say that we want to log a message that corresponds with a specific log level, event ID, an exception, a message, and some optional parameters. Most oftenly, you will use the more specific ones, such as log information, log error, log debug, and so forth. I can call log information and pass some specific details. For example, we could say that we loaded this amount of products. By default, ASP.NET Core will have console logging turned on by default. And we can configure the logger by going to appsettings.json. This will dictate which type of default logging we'd like to use. The log level for this case is going to be information. For everything that's logged out of everything that's logged from Microsoft.ASP.NET Core, that has to be a warning level. You should be very careful with logging so that you don't log any PII information, that being personally identifiable information. You don't want any user data ending up in your logger. If we run this with the debugger attached and look at the console output, we can see that there's some information coming from ASP.NET Core. For example, it's telling us that it's running on a specific port, how to terminate the application, the current development environment, where this application is located on my machine, as well as the logging information that we just provided. We have the home controller and that we loaded 3 products. If I go ahead and refresh this page, you'll notice that every time I do, this here will in fact log that information to the output. Where you store the information that's logged, that's different depending on your needs. There are built-in log providers that you can use. For example, you can store through the Windows Event Log. You could use Azure App Services, log streaming, and many other log providers out there. Again, I want to emphasize that it's truly important that you don't log any personally identifiable information. Logging is truly powerful, especially in terms of allowing us to quickly find problems, debug an application, to quickly find potential problems or hiccups in the application. While it's very useful when we're doing local debugging, it's even more so important when an application is live in production. If there's a problem, you might want to know why that happened and be able to trace your steps back. There's more resources on Pluralsight to understand more about this topic. The important part is to understand that it's built into ASP.NET Core by default, and you can configure the different log providers and add different places where the logging is going to be stored. If you're catching errors or exceptions in your applications, it's very wise to log these as errors with some useful information about what happened. Logging is powerful and a tool that you should definitely apply in your applications. Configure the different log providers and experiment with how and where it's all stored.